Hi everyone. My name is Pritish Joshi. I'm a technical architect with Banfico. We mostly work with open banking and we have multiple products, but today we'll mostly focus on one product of ours, which makes bank compliant of open banking. We built it using Keycloak six, 5, 6 years ago. Before that, we were using other enterprise solutions, but we like Keycloak and we moved all our products to Keycloak and OpenResty based stack. So Keycloak is, as you all know, I'll mostly only cover the scenarios that we will, be used in open banking. Otherwise, I'll not go too much in detail. OpenResty is our gateway, which allows us to exposes the API, any data analytics or policies that are required to make us compliant. All of that is covered through OpenResty. So let me go to the first slide. So first thing first, we'll like to discuss what open banking is. So I think Takashi tried to discuss what open banking it is at a high level, but in short, it allows users to share their data with any financial institution, which is a regulated entity in that market. Uh, and once user gives their consent, the regulated entity can use users' accounts. They can build any number of solutions on top of that. Could be a personal finance management or anything like that. So in short, there would be four main actors in this. So there would be obviously banks, fintechs which are good at technology, banks which are good at banking. There would be a regulators like in UK you'll have FCA. Similarly in Europe you'll have EPA and other players, and then obviously the customer who will get benefited from all of this. So where we come in is we have both solutions on the bank side as well as the fintech side. So we have built our own aggregator platform as well, but we have the solutions for the banks, which allows banks to be compliant. The banks don't need to do much; they can just use our solutions, which has Keycloak, which makes them FAPI and anything security compliant, and our gateway, which allows them to do any reporting or any regulatory requirements that are there in that project. So in a nutshell, this is what our solution at high level will look like. So you can see the left hand part is the TPPs or the fintechs. These are the parties who are willing to access the banking data of that particular bank. In the middle section you see here is the open banking platform, and that's where we come in. And at the end there is a bank infrastructure. So before open banking, it was the banks who was allowing users to do the banking on their online banking solutions or the mobile banking. So user was restricted to what a bank can support. So for example, if it is a legacy bank, they'll have a limited, features to help user in managing their finances. In open banking, what the regulators are striving for is they are asking the fintechs or the third parties who are really good at technology and build some solutions. So if the bank exposes their APIs in obviously in a protected manner, so the fintechs can access this data, build any solutions on top of that. The regulators would publish the specification, like the high level schema on how the specification would be, what is the security profile, and that is where Akashi and everyone else really help. So you have different security profile for different open banking regions. So for example, for UK you have something for Brazil, you have something for Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So all of that would differ. At high level, all of this would be following the same OIDC standard, but the actual spec would differ a little bit. So as you can see in this diagram, the bank can expose their core banking APIs just to us. This integration, that the second integration that you see in this diagram, the data integration. For this, they could expose the APIs through normal MTLS, IP whitelisting. So this would be a backend to backend connectivity. So the actual APIs of the banks are not exposed over internet for anyone else to access. So the bank would just whitelist us and we will be able to call those APIs. Similarly, for PSU authentication, the open banking comes with different requirements. So if, for example, it would ask the banks to support SIBA, it can ask banks to support web to web redirect, identity brokering, etc. And the bank's current identity provider might not support all of these advanced FAPI security profile and all of that. So what we do is you see the IAM in the middle block, that's our Keycloak, which allows us to do the identity brokering. So we can redirect to the bank. The bank could have any custom solution based on SAML, OIDC, or even something really custom. But anything that would be exposed to the TPP would be through our API gateway, which would be a standard OIDC FAPI compliant authorization server. The other thing that you see is the consent API. I don't want to go too much in detail, but in open banking and everything is driven through consents. So the user would have given a consent. Now this consent could be a long-lived consent. So user can ask the bank to provide the transaction data to a particular TPP for, let's say, 1 year. What it means is the TPP or the fintech can access the transactions of the user for 1 year without user ever required to do the authentication again. So in this case, what we'll do is we'll issue some long-lived tokens. So in simple terms of Keycloak, you'll issue some offline sessions and offline tokens. The fintech would refresh the data, let's say 4 times a day. The fintech will call our API gateway with the refresh token. We would validate the token obviously with our policies and then allow the calls to go through. So this is what open banking solution from us would look like. These are just some description of how we are managing the securities. So as you can see, the OAuth 2 and OpenID Connect compliance, we use Keycloak. It allows us to ensure the compliance as well as any industry standard protocols which might be newly coming. So for example, when UK open banking started, SIBA was not really a used protocol across different organizations. But now the SIBA has become really popular, and we also got the compliance in Keycloak with Takashi and everyone else. So we now have SIBA also as one of the feature. Uh, we need fine-grained access control. As I said, there are because it's a financial data, you need to have as many restrictions as possible in alignment with the compliance requirements. And then on top of that, banks also come up with their own requirements. So we need to do the role-based access control as well as policy-based access control, both of which is supported in Keycloak. So we can easily achieve this. The API security, in terms of when the APIs are called, there are some things which you can do with Keycloak, but there are some things which are beyond Keycloak. For example, there are few regulations where they ask you to validate the incoming TPP with the NCA. So any incoming request, you have to validate whether the fintech is a regulated entity in the market. And for that, we have to call a separate trust framework to validate that, for which we have our own directory, but there in different markets, these requirements are different. So for all of this, we have custom policies. So this OpenResty is nothing but a Nginx server with our own custom Lua policies that we have built over time. And now it has matured, which is serving 4 or 5 different products of ours with different Lua policies and combinations of policies. Next, when we implement, what are the key challenges? So the key challenges, as I highlighted in the first diagram I was showing, is the legacy system integration. As I said, sometimes the banks will just say that they have a REST API which you can use to validate the user, and there's nothing else. So you have to customize your flow. So either you will build a custom identity broker in Keycloak, or you will override the user federation and utilize this API and create a user federation provider. Or it could be a app to app redirect where you have to customize the complete flow. So all this legacy system integration is where most of the players in open banking struggle with. The second is the API security and PSU authentication. So on top of that, on top of the legacy system integration, there are certain requirements on the API security. As I said, it could be an NCA check, it could be certain JAWS signature requirements, it could be a requirement on encryption. So all of that is again a problem. The third is the banks have their existing APIs, and this could be built, let's say 10, 15, 20 years ago. So how do you do the data standardization and map it to the common open banking schema, which will, let's say, work across Europe or across UK, just for an example. The fourth point is, with every passing day, the open banking is getting really more and more popular. So the scalability and the performance optimization is really a concern. So when we first started, we had one of the tier one banks. They proposed that it would be a minimal use considering open banking, and now they have millions of transactions every day through open banking. So this is again a major problem. I think I discussed previously in the last Keycloak conference with few of the developers. The offline sessions are still a concern for everyone. Uh, Not just because of Keycloak, there could be other problems which are causing issues, but because it's not within our control, there are fintechs who are outside our organization trying to access and managing these long-lived consents over years. Anytime you lose an offline session, the fintech have a right to complain to the regulators saying the bank is not complying. So because of that, it's a financial data, long live user consent. You don't want the user experience to be really because of offline session it to create a problem in the user experience. So having offline sessions and managing them properly is really important. Just giving one example, I don't know if most of you will remember, there was a previous version in Keycloak where anytime you were introspecting a token, it was updating the timestamp of the client session. And because of that, when next time someone makes a refresh token call, it was telling them that they are using the wrong token. So because of that, we face uh, one of a high priority incident in our production environment. Now in the newer versions of Keycloak is already fixed, but at the time the Keycloak version we were using was 15, and that version didn't have that particular fix. So all these kind of things which come up, and because it's a regulatory projects, there are certain compliance deadlines. So sometimes you have to be we can't rely always on the version to support this completely. We have to build our own features at times. So for example, I remember first time I discussed with Takashi about the FAPI compliance. He was working on these profiles and making this compliant for the whole Keycloak community, but we had certain regulatory deadlines, so we had to create some custom solution in between that period. So that we can get the regulatory tick box. Same thing happened in open banking Brazil. Uh, the next point is because we work on open banking across the globe, so we have clients from Brazil to UK to Europe to KSA. We need to support multiple trust frameworks. I'll show you what it means. So the Keycloak comes with the default or a standard OIDC based dynamic client registration feature. But in open banking, the DCR or the dynamic client registration differs from region to region. And thus they ask you to support multiple trust frameworks. So for example, if you are operating in UK, you might have to trust the UK open banking directory. If you are in Brazil, you have to have the Brazil central bank directory. Similarly, in different regions, you have different trust frameworks. So how do you support this? This is again going to come up, and confirmation of pay and verification of pay will take a center stage in UK. This supporting multiple directories through an authorization server will become really important. These are the few of the authentications that I wanted to highlight. Um so as I showed in the first diagram, there are fintechs, there is a user, and there is a ASPSP, which is the bank. So anytime a TPP or the fintech creates a consent, a user needs to authenticate that consent. Now that authentication can happen through redirect, or it could be through a decoupled SIBA flow. So in the redirect authentication, the user would be on TPP's platform. Now this could be a TPP's web platform, or it could be a mobile platform. From there, user will redirect to the bank platform. And because we would be delivering the open banking, uh, we are we are the front facing platform for the TPP. So ultimately the request will go through our Keycloak to the bank. So in the redirect, there could be multiple integrations. The one would be this: if a bank is supporting a standard, let's say OIDC based authorization server, you can just do simple identity brokering, as Marek was just showing you. You redirect from one to another identity provider. This would be simple if it is a simple identity brokering. The second flow could be bank doesn't have any redirection or an identity provider. The bank has just given you a back channel API to authenticate the user. In this case, what we will do is we'll create a user federation. So the user will land on our Keycloak login page, which would resemble to bank look and feel. But once user provides the credential, we would call the backend bank API, albeit it's not really secured, and you shouldn't ask the bank customer to provide credentials. But if the bank doesn't have any other option, this is the worst case scenario. The third could be the mobile app. So user is on TPP's mobile app. Now TPP has created a consent and it will hit the authorization endpoint of Keycloak or Banfico authorization server Keycloak. Uh, because we support app to app redirect, we would have deep linked that authorization endpoint with the bank's mobile app. So when the TPP redirects, it will open a bank login page or the mobile screen. Bank will take the consent of the user and the remaining flow would be orchestrated by our Keycloak. So these are different redirect flows that can happen. In all of this, Keycloak would be the central point. It can orchestrate it through a user federation provider. It can orchestrate through an identity. The next is the SIBA flow. Again, this has not become really popular in the open banking world, but there are few fintechs and the few banks who are supporting this, where they are using SIBA to do the back channel authentication. In this, as you would all know, the standard SIBA flow, ultimately it would be the bank which gives a pop-up on user's mobile device saying you have a consent to authorize. The user will authorize the consent, and then we would give the token, whether it is a push notification or it could be a polling mechanism. So this is again, on top of this, there are new use cases that have developed. So there has been a new thing in KSA, for example, where you have QR based decoupled redirect. So ultimately what you do is you ask user to scan a QR code. User will scan the QR code and then it will redirect you to. So in underneath it uses the same SIBA flow, but there are certain new use cases that have come on top of it. The last thing I wanted to show is multiple trust framework. So as I said, we also have a product which gives an open banking directory, so as a trust framework. So in this, and you also have similar open banking directory in UK, although the regulation doesn't ask all the fintechs or the banks to use only one directory. The trust framework can be built by anyone. So as long as both the fintech and the bank trust that particular trust framework, uh, and it is complying with all the regulation and compliance requirements, it can act as a directory. So in our case, in this case, what will happen is in normal OIDC DCR, you get a registration request, and you obviously you have certain registration policies in Keycloak with which you can validate. But in this open banking specific scenario, there are certain requirements which comes with the regulation where you are getting a software statement assertion in the request. It's nothing but a signed jot by a directory which certificates that this software belongs to this particular fintech. Now, in the request, whatever software statement assertion comes, the bank needs to validate that this SSA is signed by the right directory. Now, in case you need multiple directory support, your authorization server should have the flexibility to handle this. And we saw multiple players in UK struggling with this when they moved on from one directory to another directory for confirmation of pay. But in Keycloak, because it's simple SPIs, you can support as many directories as you want. It was easier for us to manage this. We because we had our own directory, we could just showcase that with Keycloak we can support multiple frameworks. We just incoming request, we will see which directory is the issuer, and based on that we can do the validation. So I didn't want to take so much time. I don't know. I think it's about time. So if does anyone have any questions on the things we discussed? Sorry, I didn't want to go too much in Keycloak. You guys are all going through Keycloak so much. So yeah.
So thank you for the talk. And what I didn't understand is the open banking model only a customer bank communication interface, or is this a bank to bank interface as well?
Yeah, so a bank can work as a TPP as well. So for example, I'm just giving an example. One bank can call another bank. They also have to work as a TPP. So they need to get a license from the regulator. that they can work as a TPP, because these are different roles, right? So being a bank is a role of ASPSP, being a TPP is a role of either you are account aggregation or you are a PIS role. So as long as the regulator certifies you that you can be a account aggregator or a PIS, you can work as a TPP and call other banks. So the same solution we have in Brazil market, where one of the bank is using our platform to call other banks. But they, again, that will work the same way as a TPP would do. So there is no separate integration. This integration will work same whether it is a TPP which is calling or a bank which is calling. For example, Lloyd's is both bank as well as the TPP.
But in Europe, we have to switch infrastructure.
Yeah, so in Europe also there is a specification called NextGen. It's a specification name, and they are publishing now the new PST2 spec. So let's see how it goes. But again, there also it's the same thing. It hasn't gone really popular in Europe, but at least in UK it has gone really good. In Brazil it has become really good. But Europe primarily, what I think is over next year it would more of a information of pay and verification of pay model, and then maybe the open banking will pick up again.
It's more of a personal interest question, but um, open banking is a nice concept. Will it ever be possible for me as a bank consumer, like with a bank account, to use APIs for paying stuff or looking at my account sheets or something like that? Do you know anything if there's plans for that anywhere or?
Yeah. So for now, it is only the regulated entities which are calling still. So it's a TPP, which is not anyone can be a fintech, right? You need to have a valid license to operate. So ultimately, they are getting the data through APIs.
Hmm,
So it's now on top of that, they can show whatever they want. So they can build n number of solution on top of
sure.
it. Now, if the end user, what you're asking, if I understand correctly, what you're asking is, can end user see that data in API? And
Not necessarily. Like if I could access my bank's API directly, since I'm a customer and it's my bank account, I should already have rights to look at the APIs for that, in my opinion.
yeah, so I think uh, just from the security standpoint, I feel that would be a bit of a task for regulators to manage. But currently, it is through the TPP you can access. So, for example, you
Mm,
have data in 4 different banks. You have four
mm,
different accounts, right? So, through a TPP, you can access all those 4 accounts,
mm.
bring it to one platform, that particular TPP's platform, and see the aggregated data. Right?
Okay,
So, this
yeah.
is the data. So, but if you
So I
want to
would have
build,
to look at a, I don't know, let's say broker
yeah,
who has access to the banks, and then I can say I
yeah.
make account there, and then I okay, thank you.
And I think players like Google and all these big giants, right? They will build better solutions, like in terms of financial solution products. On top of this, once they get to access all the banking data, they can build n number of solutions on top of it. So, yeah, I think it's time is done. And anyone else has any question? No. Thank you, everyone.